We're going to jump straight in. If you're a leader in a senior role and things are technically fine, the business is moving and your team's performing, but leadership feels a little bit heavier than what it should, this session is for you. What I want to be clear about before we start, though, is what it is and what it's not today. So this is not a productivity session. I'm not going to give some productivity hacks. There's too many of them out there. It's also not about burnout or well-being, and it's not about fixing you as a leader. This is a working session about load, about what you're carrying, and how leadership load accumulates so quietly that most leaders don't notice it until it becomes absolutely normal. The thing about it is most leaders are performing, and I mean really performing. Most senior leaders don't wake up thinking something's broken. We wake up thinking, why does this feel harder than it should? Or why does it feel harder than what it used to? And this is because technically everything is still working. But over time, as the role gets bigger and we grow up in our roles, more decisions land. We're leading more people. There's much more complexity, and very little ever leaves your scope. And it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like competence. It looks like reliability, and it looks like leadership because you're performing. What tends to get called out a lot is time, and we call it a time issue because time is what we can see. It's visible. Calendars are full. Meetings are stacked, especially now in the remote age of Zoom meetings back to back, no moving between meeting rooms, and you're working flat out. But what's underneath all that pressure? It's not the calendar, it's actually more bandwidth, and that's what we don't see. So, what I mean by bandwidth is your available capacity to actually lead. And this is mentally, it's emotionally, and it's practically. And it's not about, it's without dropping the ball, delaying decisions, or paying for it at some point further down the line. And your time and attention are finite. Okay, there's a limited thing that can go through it, and this is what I'm talking about in terms of bandwidth. And it's completely normal. It's not a flaw, it's human. And the wider this channel is, or the wider our bandwidth is, the more it can hold. So we can take more decisions, we can take more responsibility, and we can hold more context. But when it's full, even if the work is good and results are coming, everything new that we add on top does one of these three things. Decision quality will drop, the business will slow down, or the shows up somewhere else, and that's usually, and unfortunately, with us. So a couple of questions to consider as I go through the session today is, what are you currently carrying that's technically not part of your job, but still stays with you? And where in your week are you trading your time and your focus for availability for the business and everything else? Just to be really clear on this though, you are not the problem as the leader. What's changed is, and this is very common, that our roles grow and evolve, but how we operate within the system or within that role doesn't keep up and doesn't change because everything's moving so fast. And success of and what most of us are achieving changes how the business or organization expects of us in terms of more access, they want more impact, and they want more capacity. But because things are still functioning, no one questions the cost of this bandwidth limit that we have. Not the board, not your peers, not your team, and really not even us as individuals, because our performance is still strong. The teams look fine, the results are there. So what's the bandwidth loss? And this is really interesting because it doesn't announce itself. It shows up really slowly as constant reactivity, slower or avoided decisions, no space to be a coaching leader or think ahead strategically in the business. Delegation can drop off, and work, and this is one of the biggest costs, is work starts bleeding into lunchtimes, into evenings, and into weekends. But nothing's breaking, everything still works, but there's cost. And maybe this sounds familiar. So we're going to look at the 5 common bandwidth drains that show up when all this responsibility starts stacking up. Now, it's not everything. There's many drains here, but these are the most common that I've found in all the work I'm doing and what I've experienced myself. And they're not red flags and they're not burnout. They're just quiet patterns that reduce decision quality. They increase your leadership load, and more often than not, you don't notice it's happening because, as I've said, everything is still working. Now, as I go through them, there's nothing to do, there's no need to write them down. Just let each one sit with you and see if something resonates or if something lands inside. And if it does land, that's usually the signal that it could be happening, and that's really worth noticing as we talk through them today. So the first one, you become the default decision maker. So this one builds really slowly over time. Your team pauses when they shouldn't. Progress really slows down when you're not available, when you're not there to take a decision. And even good routine and small decisions, not the critical ones that you should be taking, but the small ones, they wait for you. And it's not because your team aren't capable of acting on these decisions. It's because they've learned, not intentionally, but we've taught them that things move much faster and much safer if you or we take the final call. And it's not failure. This is reliability that's become dependence for your team. So a question as we finish that one is, where are you still holding decisions that don't need to be yours anymore? Pattern number 2, absorbing the pressure. Now this one gets praised a lot because this is good leadership, and it is. You buffer, you absorb, you shield the team, you take it on your shoulders, and you hold the tension that's in the business so others, particularly in the team that you're leading, they don't have to. And you do it because you want to be a good leader and supportive. And this is great, but to a point, because the team stays calm. Your stakeholders, your boss, the CEO, the C-suite, they're all reassured because you've got everything under control. But the hidden cost of this is nothing actually leaves you. You're holding everything. And it feels like great leadership until you realize everything is stopping with you. So the question to think about with that one is, what pressure have you been carrying just because no one else can see it? So pattern number 3, and this is what I talked about at the beginning about our roles growing and our system doesn't. And what I mean by the system is how we operate day to day. And the business is traveling really fast. Roles do change, but our way of operating doesn't. Your scope increases, you've got more meetings, we all know that how that is. There's more stakeholders, there's more conversations, there's more accountability, there's more to juggle. There's much more stress to manage, but the ways that we've been taught to work haven't changed or haven't evolved for this new bigger system. And there's much more to hold. And because the system didn't update, your bandwidth is naturally that path that you've got to absorb everything is getting smaller and smaller. And what the business is learning here is that your role can stretch without changing how you operate. And this one takes a little bit of stepping back to look at it. So where have you outgrown your old operating system, and what part of your leadership system hasn't caught up with the new way of working, the new role? Pattern number 4. So this happens because we are a modern leader, and this is where your availability replaces your focus. And we want to be there. I get it. We want to be there to support our teams. And we have so many touch points now that our teams can reach out and talk and speak and engage with us on. So if I go through Slack, we have email, we have WhatsApps, we have the quick questions over a coffee, the back-to-back Zooms, open door policy, come and ask me any question at any time. And you want to be responsive and you want to be accessible because that's what you do. You're a human leader. So you're in every room, you're on every thread, and you're always ready to jump in and help when the business needs it. And it does feel human and it does feel supportive, and it absolutely is. But again, there's a cost, because your day becomes chopped into pieces. Your thinking time gets more shallow and gets interrupted, so you're not getting that flow that you need to be a senior leader and to be in strategic work. And that thinking work, the stuff that only you can do, gets done at other moments. So it can be lunchtime or at night or pushed further down the road. And so what the team is learning here is access to you matters much more than your focus as their leader. And again, this is an unintentional education that we're giving our teams. So a couple of questions there for you. Who has more access to you than your own strategic time? And what is the cost of being always available? Because there is one. And then the final pattern, being reactive by default. So this one is really the stacking up of the previous four. And it's your calendar is running the day, it's running the week, it can run months. Meetings replace decisions. We're defaulting to 60-minute meetings or meetings that could have been a quick email or quick conversation. And everything is urgent because of all the bandwidth challenges that you've got. And this urgency is setting the direction of the business instead of strategy. And the business is learning that pressure decides faster than intent. You're responding, or we're responding to this pressure and naturally reacting to what's happening, but we're not shaping priorities because our bandwidth is getting impacted. And this is the result of everything else stacking up. What's super important to acknowledge here, and just to take a moment on this, is these are not personal flaws. These are not things that we're doing wrong. They're side effects of being really good at what you do. They're side effects of being successful and growing up in a business. But what's happened is the business has learned to lean on you, and you've massively risen up to that and met that expectation head on because that's what you do. You're great at what you do in your role. But there's a flip side. If some of these patterns in your leadership, without meaning to, you've become the stabilizer of the business. And in some ways, and not meaning to, a bottleneck for the business because by having all those blind spots or the bandwidth examples I've talked about, you're slowing the business down. And what won't fix this is more effort. But this is the first thing that we as leaders do. We go in and we push harder. We look for time hacks. We look for better systems. We look for better tools. We look for more discipline. We look to do more pushing through. But the effort doesn't really reduce the load that I've talked about. All that does, because none of those things are actually looking at how you can move the load around and look at how you operate. They're just helping you carry all that pressure and all that load for a bit longer. And so this is where the cost comes in. And it actually shows up not immediately and not straight away. It's not dramatic. It doesn't hit you in the face. It shows up really slowly as less thinking space for you. It shows up as slower, delayed decisions for you and the team. Your presence thins. So it thins in work because you're spread over everything. You're spread over so many tasks, of some of which should not be yours. And then this compounds and your presence thins at home because you play catch up and work on your strategic responsibilities outside of working hours. And this affects our home life. And your strategic energy gets replaced by this survival instinct energy because of that reactivity I talked about. And because it happens slowly, it just gets normalized. And because it happens really gradually, it's so easy to normalize, but it's not sustainable and it's really not necessary. So before we close out, which of these have you already adapted to without even realizing it? Maybe one or two have hit home today. The thing about it is, if you've recognized one or two of these in your world, it's not a breaking point. It's not burning out. It's simply a signal that what you're carrying isn't sustainable in its current form. The good news is load and how it's distributed can be redesigned at any point. So you don't need to decide anything today. This is the whole point of this session is really just to give some visibility and new perspective of it. And the whole thing about it is seeing these patterns comes first. You don't need to decide anything today. You need to sit with it a little bit. The visibility doesn't demand you do anything today. But once you see a pattern or a couple of patterns, it changes how you see your week. And once you see that, and once you see how it's impacting you and your family and the business, you can't really unsee it anymore. So what some leaders do next. So some leaders, when I've had these conversations, choose to look more closely at parts of their leadership in the business. And they look more closely at decisions, what decisions truly need their input and what decisions can be given to the team. Because we hire these amazing teams and then hold the decisions ourselves. So we often get in the way. What can delegate properly down to our team? Where the pressure should be held with us, but where the pressure can be cascaded back down in the team. You know, we work with very senior people, and these people can hold the pressure as well. What patterns that you've seen don't have the right return on investment for the business, you know, where your time is most impactful. And they also look at how they can protect their bandwidth because this allows them to be more strategic in their business and in their role. Now, what's really important here is that there's never a complete rebuild. This is a very rare thing. It's not about overhauling everything and everything they're doing each day, but it is about identifying and stopping to carry what no longer belongs to them in their role. If you've seen a couple today, there's a private snapshot. And if you want a clear view of where your bandwidth is being used, this is a really cool tool. It is not a test. There's no right or wrong answers. It's not going to diagnose you. It's not going to give you answers and solutions. It's just going to give you a snapshot of where your bandwidth is being used up and where the load may be costing you a little bit more than it should today. If that's interesting, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen, or you can DM me after and I'll send it to you with no obligation whatsoever. If some of the patterns are addressed and once you look at them and you see how it's affecting your leadership, what happens when you change something? So you stop making every decision and you start shaping bigger ones. You start having more impact on the business. Instead of being reactive, you're being proactive. Your team will grow and become faster and much more motivated because you're no longer that unintentional bottleneck and you're able to coach and push the team that you've hired to do amazing work to do that amazing work. Your calendar can reflect what matters, not what is urgent. And this is really important. This one, you get your thinking time back and you get your presence at home because you're not using your home environment to catch up on your strategic thinking. And a big thing that gets addressed to all of this is you get your energy back because that bandwidth drain really can impact our energy as leaders. And just rest isn't going to solve that, but it comes from much more space. And leadership can feel lighter again, not because there's less to do in this, but because you're approaching your leadership differently and the load is carried in a different way. So that's the end of the session. I wanted to close out on this. Leadership still delivers because it does. We're all great at the role that we do. The work still works, but the cost isn't visible yet if you've got some of these bandwidth drains. And it could be costing more than it needs to if nothing changes. So thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it. I hope it's been useful.